Peredur, son of Efrog. Earl Efrog held an earldom in the north, and he had 7 sons. Efrog made his living not so much from his land, but from tournaments and battles and wars. And, as often happens to those who follow battle, he was killed himself and his 6 sons. And his 7th son was called Peredur. He was the youngest of his 7 sons. He was not old enough to go to war or battle. Had he been, he would have been killed as his father and brothers were killed. Now his mother was a wise and clever woman. She thought hard about her son and his territory, and decided to flee with the boy to wasteland and wilderness, leaving behind the inhabited regions. She took no one with her save women and children, and meek, mild men who could not and would not fight or wage war. In the boy's hearing, no one dared mention horses or weapons, in case he set his heart on them. And every day the boy would go to the long forest to play and throw holly darts. One day Peredur saw a herd of goats that belonged to his mother, and 2 hinds near the goats. The boy stood and marvelled to see those 2 without horns, while all the others had horns, and he assumed the 2 had been missing for a long time, and because of that they had lost their horns. With strength and speed he drove the hinds along with the goats into a building for the goats at the far end of the forest. Then he returned home. "Mother," he said, "I saw a strange thing over there. 2 of your goats gone wild, and they have lost their horns because they have been running wild for so long under the trees, and no one had more trouble than I had driving them inside." Then everyone got up and went to look, and when they saw the hinds, they were greatly amazed that anyone had the strength or speed to catch them. Now, one day they saw 3 knights coming along a bridle path by the side of the forest. Who were they but Gwalchmai son of Goia, and Gwaira son of Gwistil, and Owain son of Urien, and Owain bringing up the rear, pursuing the knight who had shared out the apples in Arthur's court. "Mother," he said, "what are those over there?" "Angels, my son," she said. "I will go and be an angel with them," said Peredur, and he went to the path to meet the knights. "Tell me, friend," said Owain, "did you see a knight passing here either today or yesterday?" "I don't know what a knight is," he replied. "The same as myself," said Owain. "If you tell me what I ask you, then I'll tell you what you want to know." "I will, gladly," said Owain. "What is that?" said Peredur, pointing to the saddle. "A saddle," said Owain. Peredur asked what everything was, and what it was intended for, and how it was used. Owain told him in detail what everything was and how it was used. "Continue on your way," said Peredur. "I have seen what you are asking about, and I will follow you as a knight immediately." Then Peredur returned to his mother and the household. "Mother," he said, "those over there are not angels, but knights." Then she fell into a dead faint. But Peredur went over to where the horses were that carried firewood for them, and brought food and drink from inhabited regions to the wilderness. And he took a bony dapple-grey nag, the strongest in his opinion, and he pressed a pannier on it as a saddle and went back to his mother. With that the countess recovered from her faint. "So," she said, "you are wanting to set off?" "I am," he said. "Wait for words of advice from me before you set off." "Then speak quickly," he said. "I will wait." "Go to Arthur's court," she said, "where you will find the best men and most generous and most brave. Wherever you see a church, chant the Our Father to it. If you see food and drink, if you are in need of it and no one has the courtesy or goodness to offer it to you, help yourself. If you hear a scream, go towards it, and a woman's scream above any other scream in the world. If you see a fair jewel, take it and give it to someone else, and because of that you will be praised. If you see a beautiful lady, make love to her even though she does not want you. It will make you a better and braver man than before." Peredur imitated with twisted branches all the horse trappings he had seen. He set off with a fistful of sharp-pointed darts in his hand, and for 2 nights and 2 days he travelled wasteland and wilderness, without food and without drink. Then he came to a great desolate forest, and far into the forest he could see a clearing of open ground, and in the clearing he could see a pavilion, and under the impression that it was a church, he chanted the Our Father to the pavilion, and he approached it. The entrance was open, and there was a golden chair near the door, and a beautiful auburn-haired maiden sitting in the chair with a frontlet of gold on her forehead, and sparkling stones in the frontlet, and a thick gold ring on her hand. Peredur dismounted and went inside. The maiden made him welcome and greeted him. At the far end of the pavilion he could see a table and 2 flagons full of wine, and 2 loaves of white bread, and chops of the flesh of sucking pigs. "My mother," said Peredur, "told me that wherever I saw food and drink, to take it." "Then go, Lord, to the table," she said, "and God's welcome to you." Peredur went to the table, and he took half the food and drink for himself, and left the other half for the maiden. And when he had finished eating, he got up and went to the maiden. My mother, he said, told me to take a fair jewel wherever I saw one. Then take it, friend, she said. I certainly won't begrudge it to you. Peredur took the ring, and he went down on his knee and kissed the maiden, and he took his horse and set off. After that, the knight who owned the pavilion arrived. He was the proud one of the clearing, and he saw the horse's tracks. Tell me, he said to the maiden, who has been here since I left? An odd-looking man, lord, she said, and she described Peredur's appearance and manner. Tell me, he said, has he been with you? No, he has not, by my faith, she said. By my faith, I don't believe you. And until I find him to avenge my anger and shame, you shall not stay 2 nights in one and the same place. And the knight got up to go and look for Peredur. Meanwhile, Peredur continued his journey to Arthur's court. And before he arrived at Arthur's court, another knight came to the court and gave a thick gold ring to a man at the gate to hold his horse. And he himself proceeded into the hall where Arthur and his retinue were, and Gwenhwyvar and her maidens, and a chamberlain serving Gwenhwyvar from a goblet. And the knight grabbed the goblet from Gwenhwyvar's hand and poured the drink that was in it over her face and breast, and gave Gwenhwyvar a great clout on the ear. If there is anyone, he said, who wants to fight me for this goblet and avenge this insult to Gwenhwyvar, let him follow me to the meadow, and I'll wait for him there. And the knight took his horse and made for the meadow. Then everyone hung his head for fear of being asked to avenge the insult to Gwenhwyvar, and they assumed that no one would commit such a crime as that, unless he possessed strength and power of magic and enchantment, so that no one could wreak vengeance on him. With that, Peredur came into the hall on a bony dapple-grey nag with its untidy, slovenly trappings, and Kai was standing in the middle of the hall floor. Tell me, you tall man over there, said Peredur, where is Arthur? What do you want with Arthur? Said Kay. My mother told me to come to Arthur to be ordained a knight. By my faith, said Kai, your horse and weapons are too untidy. Then the retinue noticed him, and they began to make fun of him and throw sticks at him, and they were glad that someone like him had arrived, so that the other incident could be forgotten. Then the dwarf came in, who had come a year earlier to Arthur's court, he and his she-dwarf, to seek Arthur's hospitality, which they received. But apart from that, they had not spoken a word to anyone for the whole year. When the dwarf saw Peredur, Ah, he said, God's welcome to you, fair Peredur, son of Efrog, chief of warriors and flower of knights. God knows, lad, said Kai, that's bad behaviour to stay dumb for a year in Arthur's court with your choice of men with whom to talk and drink, and to call such a man as this in the presence of the emperor and his retinue, chief of warriors and the flower of knights. And he gave him a clout on the ear until he fell headlong to the floor in a dead faint. Then the she-dwarf came. Ah, she said, God's welcome to you, fair Peredur, son of Efrog, flower of warrior and candle of knights. Well, girl, said Kai, that's bad behaviour, to stay dumb for a year in Arthur's court without saying a word to anyone, and today to call such a man as this, in the presence of Arthur and his warriors, flower of warriors and candle of knights. And he kicked her until she was in a dead faint. Tall man, said Peredur, tell me, where is Arthur? Be quiet, said Kai. Go after the knight who left here for the meadow, and take the goblet from him, and overthrow him, and take his horse and weapons, and after that you will be ordained a knight. Tall man, he said, I will do just that. And he turned his horse's head and went out to the meadow. And when he arrived, the knight is riding his horse in the meadow, great his pride and his power and prowess. Tell me, said the knight, did you see anyone from the court coming after me? The tall man who is there, he said, told me to overthrow you, and take the goblet and the horse and the weapons for himself. Quiet, said the knight. Go back to the court, and in my name ask Arthur to come to fight with me, either he or someone else, and unless he comes quickly, I will not wait for him. By my faith, said Peredur, you choose. Whether it is with or without your consent, I will take the horse and the weapons and the goblet. And then the knight attacked him angrily, and struck him a powerful and painful blow of the butt of his spear between shoulder and neck. Young man, said Peredur, that is not how my mother's servants would play with me. I will play with you like this. And he aimed a sharp-pointed dart at him, and hit him in the eye so that the dart came out through the nape of his neck, and he fell stone dead to the ground. God knows, said Owain, son of Urien, to Kai, you behaved badly towards that foolish man you sent after the knight, and one or two things has happened. Either he has been overthrown or killed. If he has been overthrown, the knight will consider him a nobleman, and Arthur and his warriors will be eternally disgraced. If he has been killed, they will still be disgraced, but more than that, it will have been your fault. And I will lose all face unless I go out and find out what has happened to him. Then Owain made his way to the meadow, and when he arrived, Peredur was dragging the man behind him. Lord, said Owain, wait, I will remove the armour. This iron tunic will never come off, said Peredur. It is part of him. Then Owain removed the armour and the clothing. "Here you are, friend," he said. "Now you have a horse and armour that are better than those you had. Take them gladly and come with me to Arthur, and you will be ordained a knight." End of part 1.